In our last lecture, we saw the building blocks for a data platform, for implementing a data platform. In this lecture, we'll have a look at the sources, the different types of sources or what kind of a data they can send while building these architectures. So as we had seen last time, in sources, it can be a batch source or it can be a real-time source, and the data, the type of data that they can send is either it can be a structured, semi-structured or unstructured data. In this lecture, we'll have a look at the streaming and versus batch data. What does it really mean and how we can ingest this data? So sources can send us either batch data or streaming data. Okay, so what's the difference in these two? Batch data generally we will have to ingest, let's say once in a day, or it can be an end of the day process. Okay, it can be end of day EOD process, it can be micro batches. Okay, or it can even be weekly or monthly batches, or sometimes it can be an annual batch also, right? So some sources would be sending data on a daily basis or multiple times in a day. When it comes to micro batches, right, it can be, let's say, hourly batches, or even a batch of like 30 minutes or 15 minutes. Streaming sources are the ones who are going to send us data in real time. Now even in real time, right, it can be an actual real time or it can be a near real time. Okay, so what's the difference? Real time is where you need whenever we talk about streaming or real time sources, right, we talk about a term called latency, right? What is latency? It is latency means your response time, right? If you are getting the data from a source system who is sending a real time data, you need to ingest it and process it immediately, right? So the latency here, right, it can be at a sub-second level, right? It can be milliseconds maybe, right? But when it comes to near real time, it is okay if we can have latency maybe in minutes, right? So it can be, let's say, 30 seconds to even, right, like 5 minutes. Okay, so based on this, so first we need to understand this, right? Now why it is important whether it's a batch data or streaming data, because the ingestion mechanism that we'll have to use, right, it will be based on that, or even ingestion or even processing, right? Let's say we want to do streaming processing. Okay, you want to get the insights in real time and the source system is sending you streaming data. You can consider use case here like the credit card fraud analytics. Okay, so someone has swiped a credit card and it's a fraudulent transaction, you should immediately get alerted for it. It's a streaming use case, right? So in this use cases you cannot really land the data, right? You cannot land the data or persist the data in your data lake. Okay, this cannot be done because then the latency would be high. So first we need to understand if it's a batch or streaming, and then accordingly take a call on the ingestion mechanism. So maybe in our next lectures, right, we'll have a look at how do we ingest a batch data or how we can ingest a streaming data. But for now, just try to understand this. What are the different considerations, right? These are all the design considerations while processing data from a source system. We first need to analyze whether it's a batch data and streaming data, and within that what is important to understand the frequency of the data, right? Is it a micro batches or end of the day batch, or is it a streaming data? Based on this we'll come up with the ingestion mechanism as well as the processing mechanism, and also the storage mechanism. Okay, in the last lecture we saw the different types of sources and how they are going to send the data. It can be either batch or real time. In this lecture you'll see what is the types of data, the nature of the data that a source system can send. So it can either be a structured data, it can be a semi-structured data, or it can be unstructured data. So let's try to understand what does this really mean, right? So structured data are the sources which can send you data in a proper structure, like in table formats or CSV format. So it is like, let's say, an source which is sending RDBMS data, from where we are ingesting a data from RDBMS systems, or any files like CSV. So data here, right, it has a fixed schema, right? There would be some structure. Let's say there is an employee ID, employee name, and address. Okay, so there is a fixed structure, so all the records will follow this structure, right? There might be some records where the value is absent, okay, but it will be filled by either, like, spaces. Let's say the name is not available, so it will be spaces, but always there will be a fixed structure. So this is called as structured data. The second is the semi-structured data, right? To give examples of this is like your XML files or JSON files, right? Nowadays JSON is very popular. So it may contain certain records, right, where some of the columns are not present at all, right? See, in structured data, all the columns were present. It may have spaces in it on no values or some default values, but always it will have all the attributes present. But when it comes to JSON, right, say one record may have employee ID and name, while the other record may just have the ID and the name would not be present at all. So it's a semi-structured data. So generally XML or JSONs are semi-structured data. So mainly source systems that send real-time messages like Kafka, right? You'll get the messages, the value column as a JSON. Okay, so this is where you will need to process semi-structured data. And finally is unstructured data. These are like your images, videos, audio files, your social media comments, right? So these are all unstructured data, right? There is no fixed structure. Let's say you're analyzing, you want to do and you want to implement a use case like sentiment analysis, right? If you go to Amazon, if you see the reviews of all the people for a particular product, so that is like all these comments are free form comments, right? This is unstructured data, and based on that you can do sentiment analysis, whether it's a uh, uh, there is a positive sentiment in the market for that particular product, or people are not very happy with it. So that kind of a sentiment analysis can be done using unstructured data. So yeah, just to summarize, there is structured data, semi-structured data, unstructured data. uh, these are all key consideration for designing a data platform based on the type of source, right? Batch or real time, and whether it's sending a structured data, semi-structured data, unstructured data. You will have to come up with an ingestion process and the storage mechanism. In our subsequent lectures we will see how does it impact the choice of storage or even the choice of ingestion and processing mechanism.